One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. What do you get when you combine AI and content repurposing? Well, you get today's interview because I had so much fun chatting with Cody from Swell AI, and we just had the most fantastic conversation. And it was one of those where we didn't know each other before this interview, and I just immediately was like, oh my gosh, we could absolutely be marketing best friends, because we had so much fun just chatting about AI and how it's impacting the industry and cool ways that we can do it and use it, and how Swell specifically is rolling out these features that I just cannot wait for you to try. So Cody Schneider is a serial entrepreneur and innovator in AI-powered content marketing. He's the founder of Draft Horse AI and Swell AI, and he has helped numerous companies exponentially grow their businesses by leveraging AI to automate content production workflows. He's been named one of Business.com's top 25 marketers to watch and has gained experience helping scale startups from the ground up through strategic content strategies. So, like I said, this was such a fun conversation. If you're at all interested in digital marketing, AI, content repurposing, like, you are going to love this conversation today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I want to introduce you to someone that I think we're just going to become instant friends. Like, Step Brothers is one of my favorite movies ever. And so I'm always like, Did we just become best friends? Because Cody is on the show today. Welcome to the show, Cody.
Crystal, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. We're sitting here chatting about marketing and I warned Cody. It was a warning because I was like, I love to nerd out about marketing. My audience knows this. And I am so excited about today's conversation because not only are we talking about marketing and content, we're blending it all together with AI, which is the hot topic of the season, of the year, of the decade. You know, it's the thing that everyone wants to know about. But really, before we dive into that, like, I just love to know more about your story and, you know, how you got started in this and like what made you fall in love with marketing. Let's actually start there. Do you have like one memory that you're like, oh, that's when I was like, this is it. Like, I love to do this stuff.
Totally. Yeah. So I started in e-commerce. So for me personally, it was probably like the first dollar you make online. You're like, oh my God, how did this happen? Or how did this work? And then you kind of get just sucked down the rabbit hole. And I always joke is like, for most people, they start out where in the marketing careers, like they start out in some type of consumer facing thing, and then they end up in B2B marketing because that's where the money is. My path was super similar to that. So it started in e-commerce. After that, I ended up working for a B2B marketing agency that specialized in like manufacturing companies. Think like windows and bathtubs and like wood paneling, like all of these very unsexy companies that are, you know, on the they're Fortune 500 companies. And so my job there was doing digital strategy for these like traditional brands. How are we going to evolve into this? And a lot of what it ended up being was really just like content marketing strategy because they had no idea how to transition from like industry publications to, you know, we're going to make one of the 100,000 page view a month blog, that type of thing. And so from that, my boss at that company had gone to Y Combinator, which is like this startup incubator in San Francisco. We always joke, like, you go out to San Francisco to learn kind of like the tricks of the trade, and it's like visit Mecca, learn everything, and then you leave. And my story's really similar to that. So he kind of introduced me to this whole other world. In relationship to that, I ended up going out to SF and working for a company called Rupa Health. I was employee 6 there and helped scale them from a $20 million valuation to a $110 million valuation in about 6 months. It was the craziest kind of growth business growth time I've ever seen in my whole life. But a lot of what my job was there was basically building out the media arm of that company. Our target customer was practitioners like doctors, nurse practitioners, et cetera. And traditionally, very hard to market to a group of individuals because they are historically a high income earning, subset. And so getting in front of them is very challenging because they're constantly being bombarded with ads, et cetera, because they have a lot of buying power. And so we really early on realized, hey, we're going to have to make some type of media component of our marketing engine so that we can basically capture their attention and create this trust and relationships with them. So we ended up spinning up a video podcast and a live class, like webinar series that we did on a weekly basis. And then we take that long form pillar content and we chop it up into all these different forms that we could distribute across social, blogs, newsletters, et cetera. And that's really the origin of Swell AI, which is the company I'm building now, which is focused on content repurposing powered by AI. So what I used to need for like a team of 20 people for, now you can do that with, basically a piece of software, which is crazy to even say that that progression has happened in like 4 or 5 years. And so, yeah, that's kind of the origin of this whole thing and how I got into this space. I'm definitely, I would say, a puzzle person, and marketing to me is like this massive puzzle of I'm trying to get people to do X and I'm trying to get people to do Y, and I have X resources. What's the way to kind of build these connections and that connective tissue? And so I'm really obsessed with that, and I kind of geek out on this. I mean, my newsletter is literally just like my personal newsletter is dedicated to just growth tactics and business ideas of like, okay, cool. Like, here's a company idea. Here's how you'd market it. And then here's all these like random tests that we've been running that we've been seeing success with. And so I could talk for hours about this in all reality, but yeah.
This is so fun because, and this is where I'm like, oh, we're kindred spirits because Cody, I could open up my phone right now and I have pictures of billboards, like driving on road trips. And I'm like, I told my husband, I'm like, oh my God, that was so good. He's like, babe, I'm listening to my podcast. I have no idea what just passed by us. And I'm like, no, but I took a picture so you can see it and we could talk about it. Like this is our road trip game is we will see small businesses as we drive through towns. And I'm like, you know, if we just changed that sign just a little bit and gave them a website and my husband could literally care less. He's just like, yeah, that's great. But it's just, 100%. But it's where like when you get that marketing bug, you see it everywhere. It's not just in your business or in your content. Like you can see great marketing. I'm obsessed with watching TV shows and seeing like how they build up these character stories online.
It's really storytelling.
But that's the piece I want to go back to Swell because, you know, when people are in this world of AI, you know, you have ChatGPT, you have your copilots, you have all of these, you know, pieces of software that can help you just generate stuff, right? They could just spit out something and it's just very generic and bland. But I love about what y'all do is you take existing content that was already told by me, the original creator, and then you can create something that's even better or more dynamic. So can you just kind of talk about that process? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So I think at the high level, just to frame this conversation for everybody, there's kind of two different ways to use AI right now for content generation. So I think the first version that everybody's interacted with is just having it, you know, basically one shot, like a blog post article. I feel like a lot of people have done this at this point. And, you know, the feedback that we get from almost everybody universally, like the first time they see it, they're like, oh my God, it just wrote, you know, 1,000-word article with, you know, in seconds. But once you start to get deeper and deeper, you realize that the content is pretty average. And so when you break down like what's going on behind the scenes, a lot of these AI models, they're trained on the general knowledge of the internet, right? So when you think about the average of the internet, it's very average. And so you're not going to get very unique or creative or like even thought leadership type content when you just go and ask the AI to say, for example, write about hotel marketing strategies for 2024. In contrast, if I was to go and interview, you know, 5 hotel marketing experts and I take, you know, those 30-minute transcripts and I put that into a context window and then I say, okay, now write me a blog post, you know, the same prompt that I used previously, but use this source material as the origin of like where these ideas are coming from. What you're going to see is that the content that ends up being created when you provide that source material is, you know, 10x what it, like from a quality standpoint, just from a uniqueness and a novelness, et cetera. And so this is really the idea that, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with and where this all ends up going, right? Like the cost of producing content is approaching zero. And you know, it's cheaper than it ever was before. But the kind of the opportunity and the long-term arbitrage and really just like the only way you're going to be able to differentiate your brand is by making original content and then using AI to repurpose that into all these different forms for wherever your target customer is spending time online, right? And so this is kind of how I try to talk about this with people is like, go find, hey, where are all the places that my, you know, people that I'm trying to be in front of spend time online? Maybe that's social, maybe that's blogs, maybe that's, you know, newsletter. And in reality, it's often a combination of all of these things. And, you know, historically, I would say, hey, you know, pick 2 of those channels, focus on just 2 of those for the next 24 months. And for most businesses, like you can have an unbelievably successful business just by doing those 2 things well together. And like a great example of this is like Facebook ads with like some type of ebook download with an email nurture, right? Like I've grown, you know, medical clinics, like physical medical clinics with that playbook. Like it's a very easy system. But now with AI, you don't have the constraints that you did previously of like, oh, this is going to take a lot of resources to be everywhere, to be kind of omnipresent, to use a buzzword. But the like you can create all of those different media types when you have that pillar, that source content. And I think that is like the, you know, I'm seeing that be the light bulb or aha moment, especially if you're a podcaster or a marketer. You can now just be in all of these places that your target customer is. where you previously it would just be a massive amount of resource suck or time suck to do that. So, but happy to go any deeper on any of those things.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Well, I love that you were putting it very generously, very nicely by saying the internet was average. It's a dumpster fire. Come on. 100%. We all know. We know it's a dumpster 100%. Fire out 100%. There. And that's what I love about, what you're talking about is you are taking the quality content that you've already created, possibly, with multiple guests or just a single audio file. If you want to keep it so basic and simple, because I know that there's someone listening right now and they're getting heart palpitations already. They're like, oh, this sounds great, but that also sounds really overwhelming because you could create content for that, but then you have to post to all those platforms and then have to keep up with the metrics. Then I have to engage with the comments. It's like, there's this whole spiral because we've seen it happen time and time again. I mean, I've been podcasting since 2018 and I have seen the rise and fall of so many creators because they burn out. And I told Cody before this, I was like, I want to make sure that we keep today's conversation very less overwhelming than other content may seem, because when I think about repurposing, it gets me excited because I immediately think about the potential audiences that I could reach. But I know there's a group of people that are listening and you're like, that just feels like so much. So can you just kind of talk about, the actual steps? Let's talk to someone that's, let's say, creating maybe a video podcast on YouTube, and they're also uploading the audio file to Buzzsprout. So those are like the 2 places where they're already creating content. But if they wanted to branch out and reuse what they're already doing in another way, what would you recommend for them?
Yeah. So I think probably the best thing I can do is lay out how we're seeing creators. For example, I'm friends with Jay Klaus, and this is a part of his workflow that he's using. So basically they use a tool like Riverside or Squadcast, exactly what we're doing, to do that high resolution video recording. They then would export that and maybe they throw it into a Descript. And what I'm talking about here, it may sound complicated, but in reality, this is a couple button clicks to get this to actually happen. So they would throw it into the script. They turn on Studio Sound, which is just an audio scaling tool. And at that point, you're 90% of the way there of having audio engineered content and video content. Maybe they put an intro at the front of it, and that is their video file that they would upload to YouTube. They could export that as an MP3. They upload it to their hosting, their podcast hosting. So you've got those 2 long forms. And I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of great information out there on how to make a show and kind of get started. But where the ball gets dropped is, okay, cool, this exists now. How do I get it in front of people? Mm-hmm. And so that's really where our focus is on that podcast marketing side, or just the content repurposing piece. So the next thing that you do is you take that video file that you just upscale the audio and Descript with. You upload it into Swell, and Swell out of the box automatically will write podcast show notes, YouTube descriptions. It'll make clips from the viral moments that we've identified within the episode. Those clips can be auto cropped into portrait or landscape mode. We built an AI model that does this. So it basically does a speaker identification, active speaker identification. So say, for example, you as the host ask a question and then the guest answers it. You could just upload a landscape file and it's going to automatically jump back and forth between those people. You can add captions automatically from the transcript. Those are AI generated, and all those different font types. It'll do newsletters, blog posts. And the big thing here is because you give this source file, this transcript, you can just ask the AI, hey, what's the tone, style, and voice of this transcript. Now write me a blog post in that same tone, style, and voice, and use vocabulary that's in that transcript. And so what people often see is like, oh, I can get 95% of the way there from a blog post being written that's 1,000 words, long. So all that content just got generated. So it's on the clip side, typically what we see people do is they then export it from Swell. They go to a social media scheduler like Buffer or later.com. Our friends are building this company called Assembly Marketing. They're amazing, and it's basically like a modern social media scheduler. I would highly suggest them. But they then go and they schedule out all that content to be cross-posted across all of the channels that they're trying to do, get those clips on. So TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. And basically we're seeing that be a lot of like top of funnel inbound for the growth of shows. So on the newsletter side, they then go and they would grow like a newsletter for their show, just an email newsletter, make it super simple. It's like the newest episode of XYZ podcast is live. Short summary, like one paragraph summary, and maybe like 5 bullet points of here's the key insights or takeaways. And like that alone, we see like 50% open rates on those, and like have the subject line be like podcast, whatever the name of the episode is. And as long as your target listener, or as long as you're the people that are on your list are interested in that content, like you're going to see great open rates and great click-through rates. But really, I think the piece there, and like how to kind of zoom out to a 40,000 foot view and think about this as in workflows rather than like you're trying to automate as much as that process and that in between process as possible. So pick those places that you're trying to create, to be present on a weekly or a daily or a monthly basis. So for a lot of podcasts, it's weekly. So it'd be like, okay, on on TikTok, YouTube, Shorts, Instagram, Reels, I'm trying to do a daily post. Okay, what's a tool that I can automatically schedule to? I sit down, every Sunday and I schedule out my whole weeks of content. And then, okay, what is an AI tool that I can use to generate all those clips? And now that whole workflow, you've got that basically established. Okay, well, let's do that same thing for a blog post, right? So I say I use something like WordPress or Squarespace, whatever my hosting or my CMS or content management system is. And I take that long form piece of content, AI writes a blog post. I then schedule that out to be published, as soon as my episode drops. Same thing with the newsletter. Okay, I can create a template within one of these AI tools like Swell. So here's a templated output for a newsletter that I'm trying to get created. I provide that raw source material, which is the episode. It automatically generates that template, and I just copy and paste that over into my email sender. And so, like, as you can kind of, if you're listening to this, you can probably guess where we're headed as a company. Like, we started out as just like an AI writer for podcasters, and what we're realizing people want more and more is like, hey, I want this kind of whole marketing stack for all of my podcast, like really distribution and promotion. And so that's where we're headed. So on our product roadmap is like social media scheduling, is SMS and email newsletter management. And just a quick shout out for people, like something we're seeing be incredibly successful is SMS for podcast promotion. We're seeing like 90% open rates, 30% CTRs. It's actually crazy. And it makes sense, right? Because like people are on a mobile device when they're listening to the episode. And so when you can like give them a text message and it's like, literally, this is what we're seeing work. It's like the newest episode of XYZ podcast is live. You'll learn 1, 2, 3. And it's like, click the link to listen now. And it just, you'd link out to the Apple podcasting URL. And again, just a really effective way that we're seeing people drive traffic to these. So happy to dig into, deeper to any of those pieces, but yeah.
I love this so much. And I feel like we're building a visual for this. Like, I love that you said like it's a workflow, because I love a workflow. First of all, I like going into Canva and building like, okay, we're going here and then we're going here and then we're going here. And everybody that's listening, if you thought, oh man, that still sounds like a lot of steps. Well, what I heard Cody say is he is replacing potentially 7 different jobs that would have previously been on your team. And when I think about, like we've already talked about, like kind of the rise and fall of creators, I remember there was a period where it was like, you start your online business and immediately hire like 7 people to do all of these things, right? You need to hire a videographer, you need to hire a podcast editor, a social media manager, a content director, a content producer, someone to help you, manage your email marketing campaigns. Like there was just so many moving pieces that were previously people, whereas now it's like, what if it's all just condensed into a few platforms that one person could help you manage kind of the back and forth pieces? And I have to say, one of my favorite, qualities that AI has really just improved over the last probably 24 months is just, it's so close to exactly what I would have said anyway, that to your point of like, it gets me 95% there. That's what makes me so happy, because again, we use something like ChatGPT that goes out to the dumpster fire of the internet, and whatever they spit out, it's like, oh no, this is terrible, or I would have never said it this way. But everything that you're talking about is originating with my voice as the creator, and it's duplicating all of this content. It's replicating it, repurposing it in ways that I'm just like, yes, like I would have told a teammate to do this. I would have, previously hired someone to create something. And it does get smarter over time in learning like, okay, this is the format. Let me give it this type of template. So totally. I love that you laid it out the way that you did. But I'm curious, Cody, because, I've seen, like I've listened to, you've been guesting on podcasts and you've created content. What's your favorite piece? Because I love to hear people's like content creator origin stories, because I like to let everybody know we're all sloppy and messy behind the scenes. Like no one just showed up ready to create content unless they were like previously on TV or something. But what did that journey look like for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see, like for me personally, was just like showing, like my go-to quote is like, this is a lifestyle choice, like content creation and creating a content marketing part, or arm for your business, or turning your business into a media company is a lifestyle choice. Like you wake up every day and you eat healthy, you wake up every day and you like push things out into the world. Right. And so I think with that as kind of the context, my advice for people, and like, if I could go back and give this advice to myself, would be like, hey, don't start anything unless you can do it, basically for indefinitely into the future. So think about like the longevity of, and this happens to a lot of creators in particular, where they're like, oh, hey, burnout is like super high for them. So what you're trying to do is, again, think about, okay, what are these things that I can do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that's not going to kill me, that I can do this, for forever. And I'm going to, because there's this compounding effect that naturally happens with content, right? Like I see so many brands, and I've consulted so many brands where they do like 30 days of writing SEO content or, making like clips for social. And they're like, well, I guess that didn't work. Like we're going to go back to cold calling. And it's like, okay, that's 30 days is nothing. Like try to lose 60 pounds in 30 days. Like let's watch that happen. And you basically, pass out because you're not eating. And so the thing that, like I am always trying to get back to is like, hey, do things that are like bite-sized pieces. And for companies, it's like, or for people that are just starting, that are listening to the show, if you post 2 days a week, right, as an example, like you record, every week you sit down and record, and you just post like 2 clips per week. And if you do that for 3 months, that's going to be way more impactful than you doing, a clip a day for a week and a half, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a component of it. The other thing that I would really try to emphasize when it comes to this stuff is like, you don't have to be everywhere. You can be just in a couple places, and then you can tack on these other things as you get your systems defined. So a lot of the times we see people like trying to 0 to 1 this, where they're like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast and then a newsletter. And then like there's all, they're stacking all these things from the get go. And that's actually, in my opinion, like the wrong thing to do. A better thing to do would be, okay, I'm going to focus on social first. I'm going to iron out this process. Once I've got it defined, documented, and lined up well, now I can move on to, I'm going to add a newsletter. Now I'm going to move on and I'm going to add blog posts, and just kind of stacking these marketing tech. And again, because you have that source file, you have that source material that you're working from, this is really easy for you to go back to. And like, this is like a part of like Swell. What I'm actually really excited about is like a lot of creators have this whole content library that they're sitting on that doesn't see the light of day after the first initial publishing, right? And so where we see the opportunity is like, hey, we can go back and almost data mine that old content library, pull out these clips that say something's going viral on TikTok or whatever, being able to query against your whole back catalog and then pull out that relevant information as that's needed. That's where we see this kind of like massive opportunity to make the library that you've already created even more powerful and effective for your brand and your business. And that's going to become more and more of an asset as time goes on. And so I just to restate that really simply, like do things that are, bite-sized to begin with, layer those and together and compound those. And then if you start a thing, have the mindset that, I'm going to do this for, at least 2 years for this to, and a lot of it is with most marketing, like people think marketing, it's really like evolution, right? Like it's the last thing standing is what wins. It didn't win because it like beat everybody. It's just like it survived longer. And it's the same idea with your business, with your content marketing strategy. If you can just like survive, and we always say, joke and call it like default alive, right? Like at the end of the day, like it can continue to exist and continue to grow. You're going to have success, right? But burnout is the toughest part of this game that we're playing. You have to really think about that from the beginning, and then again, these tools can assist you in that process so that burnout is minimized. And the other thing I want to piggyback on that you said that I think is really important is like everything that we're talking about here. Like I just described that whole, here's a podcast production process and marketing strategy for that. Like that sounds like a lot. That can be done in about an hour and a half. Like you record an episode for 45 minutes, like you click a couple buttons, go do something else, come back, your files are ready basically. And then you do kind of the final editing touches and then also the social scheduling. Like that is literally the entire process. And that's an hour and a half of your time on a weekly basis, right? I think for most creators, like an hour and a half of mental like energy being focused on this thing is totally doable. We're not asking for, not suggesting this is like a 40-hour a week job, right? Like I'm watching, and like friends even do this where they started these podcasts that are like in the marketing space. My friend started this podcast called In Growth We Trust. It's like a top marketing podcast now in the UK. And for them, it's like, this is just like a side hustle thing for them. It's more, they just wanted to talk to interesting people that were in the marketing space. And they sit down, like it's 2 hours of their time on a weekly basis. They both have full-time jobs outside of that. One works at an agency and the other one works at a startup. And that's what's possible now. 2 years ago, this what we're talking about would be impossible. Like there's no way that you could have this whole other thing that you were doing. And so I think that's the opportunity that exists now. You don't have to quit your day job and, or whatever your current gig is to do this. This can be something that can be added on to what your life is right now without a lot of, change or really just like wasted time, I guess, to create the output that comes from this.
Well, and I think that is the key. It's the gift of time. Like that's what I feel like, in all my experimenting with different, there's like content specific AI, then there's more like just a typical generative AI bot. Like I have played with all different variations of it. And at the end of the day, if someone were to ask me like, well, what has AI done for you? I'm like, it's given me back time. And some of it is like the mental load that I would have previously had to, work for a few hours, just sitting there wanting to write an Instagram post. And I'm like, I have no freaking idea how I should start this or what I should talk about or writing my newsletter or a blog post and just having that blank cursor. It's just like pinging 100%. At you.
Like,
that's like,
and it's so
my
good
gosh.
At that. Like that is the thing where it's like, even just give me ideas or like, what's the 5 key insights? Okay, give me hooks from this transcript that are based off of these 5 key insights. I mean, it's going to go find you the exact place where like good clips probably exist. And then it's like 2 clicks and I've got like a clip created that's in portrait, landscape, and also, square format for every place that I'm trying to post it. And I think, again, that's what we're talking about here is like to your point, this used to be 7 different job titles, like everything that we're talking about. And now a single individual in an hour and a half can have a podcast out the door and all the marketing material like built and scheduled to all the channels. So I mean, it's
good.
It's kind of mind-blowing. 100%.
And it's good. That's the thing.
And it's going to get better. I think that's the thing with this too, is like we're in the early days of this still, right? Like there's so much more that's every 6 months we see an improvement in all of these models, and it's going to get more effective. It's going to be able to work with more source material. So again, like there's in the near future, you'll be able to take your whole back catalog of 300 episodes. You'll put it in a context window and you'll say, okay, write me a book outline based off of this book title. Like here's maybe a short description of what it looks like. Write me a chapter outline based off of the source material. It writes you a chapter outline. Then you say, okay, now go write me, the chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It writes that first draft. At that point, you can take it to a publisher, be like, cool, like here's my first draft. I talked to, 300 people. Here's all the insights from that. And that is really what AI is unbelievable at. It's great at taking unstructured data and structuring it for you. And again, like we're not doing anything new either, right? Like what I just described there with the book like production process, we've been doing that for thousands of years, right? We talk to a bunch of people, we organize the insights, and then we go and like for example, what is the book called? How to Win Friends and Influence People. Classic business book, right?
Right.
That book was 3 different journalists that went out and interviewed 150 different people on like how they view the world. They then organized that information. They wrote a book and then they brought it back to Carnegie and they're like, okay, like, can you give us like your, basically the human elements of this to get it that last 10% of the way there. It's one of the best, most like, the biggest bestsellers of all time. All we're talking about is taking things that we've already been doing before, workflows that we already had before that were human, and we're just automating them or augmenting them with these AI tools. Like that is the mindset shift with this whole thing. And that's where we're seeing the most success when people adopt these.
Yeah. And it can be done in hours or days as opposed to months and years. I mean, decades. Like, even the book description, I was like, oh my gosh, those people wrote with a pen and paper. They were writing all these notes down like that. Just like crazy. It just blew my mind to think about someone walking around with a pen and paper, a notepad, or maybe even little note cards and putting everything together. But the way you described it, I'm like, oh my God. And this is within the last 100 years. And I've been seeing studies about the adoption rate of AI as opposed to like the internet, like, the www. Boom. And then all of social media. And then AI is like 10, 20, 100x. I don't even know what the exact numbers are, as opposed to when people were just curious about the internet. And totally. I'm so fascinated about where we're going. So my last kind of question about content that I just love your insight on, looking ahead at the next 24 months or 5 years, like, what's the one thing that you're like, man, if we could just figure this one thing out? It could be related to you and your company or just marketers or content creators in general. But what do you think is like the big thing, like the next problem that if we solve it, it could just help so many more creators?
Yeah. So the thing I'm most obsessed about right now is like, can we get a company to market itself? Let's like break down that idea. But like, all the technology exists right now. Where like imagine I plug into this like marketing brain and like I have this goal and here's these resources, and now like figure out how to optimize for that goal with these resources I provided. Historically, like all these APIs exist, but there's like a human element that's in the middle. That's that middleware. AI now has like potential. And it has all the ability. It's just figuring out how all these pieces fit together to be that middleware component. So you as a creator or you as a business owner, like what you focus on is building great content or great product, right? And then these AI tools will then go and basically handle just marketing for you. And like, this is totally possible. Somebody's going to do this. We're obsessing about doing this in the content marketing space. So like my vision over the next like 2 years is, can we get this to a place where it's like you make source material and we're connected to all your social accounts, to your blog, to your, everything that you're trying to do distribution through. And as much of that as possible is just automatically ran. And then we pull that data back in from Instagram, from YouTube Shorts, from TikTok. We see, okay, of these 10 different posts that we publish, these two went more viral than the others. What do they have in common? Is there a structure that makes sense? And then that goes back into, okay, well, let's go find more clips like those and we'll schedule those out. And so it's basically would be doing the job of what a social media manager was doing previously. That logic, that understanding, totally doable, totally possible. And I think that is the thing that like is on the horizon. And in so many different spaces, whether it's in, software engineering or, social media management or any of these other kind of like job titles that were previously. There's a process and a system that is very specific and well-defined, a lot of that can be automated. And we're already starting to see this. I mean, it's like, I don't know where, search engine optimization is going because like, I don't know what's going to happen to search in all reality, right? Because I'm watching these companies where they're just like, okay, and you could go do this today, right? Like, so go to perplexity.ai. If you get their pro subscription, you use what's called Claude Opus, which is like one of their highest, like, basically AI models that exists right now. I can go have it one shot. I can say something like, write a 2,000 word blog post about Google ads for apartments. I just did this over the weekend. I'm running an experiment related to this. So what Perplexity does is it goes and it scrapes all of the search results for that target keyword, Google ads for apartments. It pulls that back, it puts it in the context window, and then Claude Opus writes an out, like basically a step-by-step tutorial on here's how to do that exact process. So I wrote 10 articles in 5 minutes. They were on the website in 5 minutes, and they're already ranking on page 2. So when we think about like that happening, like that whole system, where what's going to end up is that, you're going to be a company, right? And you're going to just be able to like basically get all of this content out into the public, like without anybody doing anything, right? And again, we're still in the early days of this, but this is where I think it's headed. So I guess the thought I'd love to leave people with is like, just by adopting even the small versions of this right now, you're going to be so much farther ahead than like other creators, other competitors that are going to not even think about this or even look at adopting this until, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, right? And like we're in a, and to another thing I'd like to kind of pull a thread on is like, why is this happening so quickly? When you look at like mobile or you look at like the internet, there was still infrastructure, like physical infrastructure that we had to create to be able to use those like technologies, right? Like we had to lay fiber for internet. We had to like get mobile devices in every person's hand for that adoption to happen. In contrast with AI, like tomorrow, and we see this like on a daily basis, like Twitter right now is literally like, that's where demos are just dropping. Like, cool, we just figured out how to do this. And like, every day something happens where I'm like, oh my God, like this is, and it's accessible instantly, right?
Yeah.
So that's why this like adoption piece, there's no physical infrastructure that's really needed. This could be argued a little bit with like, we need better chips in our phones so that we can have like local LLMs run on our mobile devices and like these types of things. But like in reality, majority of people can like right now, they can go to ChatGPT and interact with it from a phone, right? Or from a laptop. And so I think with all of this, it's like going to move incredibly quickly, but just by like being even, engaging with these tools at all right now, it's going to get you so much farther ahead than everybody else. And where this all goes and where I see this going is like, especially for early stage companies, like you're going to build a great product and you're going to be like, cool, we want to get leads, whether it's calls or form submissions or whatever. And like, go figure that out, right? And there's going to be these tools that you plug into and go do that. And I think that is the larger, like the thing that's on the horizon. That's super exciting, but also super scary. I think for business owners and like people trying to start companies, it's going to enable more and more people to do just like create business, right? Yeah. Like you get to focus on the business at its core is two things. Like you build something people want to buy and you can sell it. Like it's two sides of the same coin. At its simplest form, that's what a company is. And for a lot of people, it's like they're good at one of those things often. They're good at marketing, but they're terrible at products, or they're good at product and they're terrible at marketing. So if you can focus on like, oh, cool, like we can build, like I can build a great product and then that marketing component is handled for me. Like that is, I think, the thing that's on the horizon that is coming way faster than people, I think, realize.
Yeah. And I think, I want to leave this with everybody that's still a skeptic about AI is even if it spits out something that you're not in love with, the point is to figure out what you don't like. That way you can work it back and forth. Like I tell everybody, the secret is in the prompting. And so, go try Swell. By the way, I am a proud affiliate of Swell. So you can go to crystalprofit.com/swell and check it out. But I want you to go in there and I want you to upload a piece of content. And then if it spits out something and you're like, I don't like this, don't just shut the app. Look at it and say, well, why don't I like this? Like start questioning it, because then next time you could say, oh, well, I didn't love it because it didn't have subtitles. Next time to say, add subtitles to this blog post. Or, I wanted this type of, video that was 15 seconds or this type of, there's so many ways that you can manipulate it. Just keep working with it and don't get frustrated and give up. That is my piece of advice to anyone who's just getting started.
No, I love that. And I think that's the thing is you can interact with this and do it over and over again. The process that I see people having the most success with is find the prompt chain that creates the output you're looking for. And then I don't ever want to chat with AI once I figured out how to get it to do the thing that I want it to do, right? Maybe it's these 3 steps. I broke it down into these 3 steps where, say I'm writing a blog post and I'm like, okay, define the tone, style, and voice. Now write me a blog post outline. Now write me a blog post based on this outline and in the tone, style, and the voice defined above. Once I've created that flow and I know that works, I never want to have to go and write 3 prompts to the AI and copy this back in. I want to save that as a template, so that anytime I provide raw materials in the future, it just automatically generates that output. And the analogy I've been using is hey, we take oil and we make it into gas and diesel and aggregate and, plastics, et cetera. It's that same concept that's being applied here. So, last thing to leave your listeners with, but.
This is so good. It's been gold to go with the natural resources there. It's just been so much gold today, and this has been so fun. But before you go, Cody, I have to get you. Are you up for 3 rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the first one is, and I feel like you've already touched on this, so maybe you could just elaborate, is what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster or content creator?
Yeah, I think do sustainable things and try to automate as much of that post-production as possible. Lean into these tools. It's going to pay off dividends long-term. And the biggest, your enemy is quitting. So all you have to do is survive. If you survive long enough, it will work. I guarantee it will work. That is the only filter for all of this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. My next one is a 2-part question. And it is, what is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is the dream guest that you would love to interview?
Great question. I kind of just went on my dream podcast. So I went on Greg Eisenberg's podcast this last week, and it's literally just a startup ideas podcast, but it's a top 100 entrepreneurship podcast in the US. Super fun. It was great conversation. I think the other one that would be interesting for me would be again, I'm in this space. So it's My First Million. They talk about internet companies, and that's really what I build and what I'm obsessed with. So I think that would be interesting. Dream guest, probably just, it sounds dumb, but honestly, a musician that I'm really interested in. That's more interesting to me than the business side of these things. Because it's just a whole different world than what I exist in. I do a little bit of work in the music space, but I that is probably, where I would spend my time if I was trying to talk to those type of people. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. My last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No, I would definitely say that I am probably more big picture. I'm two modes where it's here's this very high view, or I'm in the weeds. I get in the weeds when it's figuring out, I love the puzzles of it. So it's figuring out the puzzle, defining the process, and then basically I want to hand that off to a person to manage it. I'm most effective when I do that type of work. And so I think that I'm definitely cross the T's, dot the I's is not my personality. I like to lean on people that are way more effective at that than I am. I'm more focused on we're trying to get this outcome to happen. How quickly can we get to that? And what are the levers that I can figure out that we can pull to make that time that's necessary decrease.
Awesome. Awesome. Cody, this has just been so much fun. Again, everybody go check out Swell. We're going to have a link, where you're listening to this, but is there another place where everybody can, learn more about all the awesome stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm most active on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can go reach out to me there, and then swellai.com. Maybe you get in the support chat and say like, "Hey, I have a question for you." Like, I will jump into that. We're still a super small company. We're about 8 people at this point, depending on if you count like our interns. Yeah, that's like happy to connect with anybody and answer any questions that they have. So
awesome! Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Crystal. It's been awesome. I hope to come back in the future. So.
I told you it was going to be a fun interview, and Cody did not disappoint. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/swell, SWELL, to try out Swell AI. This is such a fun tool, and I'm going to be sharing other information about Swell. We actually have some upcoming videos that we're producing and some other fun things that I'm doing to partner with Cody and his team to bring some of the best AI resources to you, whether you're just creating your content, you're repurposing it, you are trying to create that marketing brain, that marketing machine behind all the things that you're already doing with your content and your production. Like, you are absolutely going to love Swell. So again, go to crystalprofit.com/SWELL to try out Swell today. But that's all I have for you. So make sure you go check out Swell and learn more about Cody's company and all the fantastic things that they are doing to help content creators and marketers grow their business, but also create content in a way that keeps it fun and energetic and super creative. But that's all I have for you. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, "Send Crystal a text message." And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, "Send Crystal a text message." And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.